Theo is doing it again. He knows he's doing it. That's the part that keeps him up at 3 in the morning with the phone face down on the nightstand and the ceiling doing nothing useful. He's 31 years old. He has a steady income. He has a credit card balance that hasn't been zero since he was 23. He has a savings account with $340 in it, which is exactly the kind of number that doesn't protect you from anything. And somewhere underneath all of that, if you look at it long enough, is a pattern. Not bad luck, not the economy, not the car repair that came at the wrong time, or the medical bill, or the roommate who left without paying the last month. A pattern. The same shape, different year, different dollar amount. Same shape. The question nobody wants to sit with is why. Not why in the surface sense. Not, I spent too much on dining out, or I should have opened a Roth IRA at 22. Those answers are technically correct and completely useless. The real question is structural. Why does someone who understands, intellectually, that they're making a harmful choice make it anyway? Why does Theo, who has read 3 personal finance books and listened to more podcast episodes about budgeting than he can count, still feel a physical urgency to spend his paycheck within 72 hours of it landing in his account? That urgency isn't random. It isn't laziness. It has an origin point. And the origin point is almost never where people think it is. Most people frame their financial life as a problem of discipline. They didn't have enough of it. They need more. They need better systems, better apps, a stricter budget, a tighter plan. And so they try harder. They set up automatic transfers. They delete the shopping apps from their phone. They meal prep on Sundays. And it works for a while. Sometimes 3 weeks, sometimes 3 months. And then something happens. A slow week at work, an argument with someone they love, a Tuesday that feels heavier than it should. And the old behavior comes back. Not gradually, immediately. Like a door that was never really locked. That's not a discipline failure. That's a signal. The behavior is doing something that the discipline can't address. Because the discipline is aimed at the symptom, and the symptom is not the problem. Theo grew up in a house where money was a mood. Not a plan, not a system, a mood. When his father got paid, the house felt lighter. There was food Theo didn't expect, a kind of loose generosity that showed up for a few days and then disappeared. And then it was tight again. Not dramatically, not crisis level every time, but tight in the specific way that children feel before they have language for it. The quiet at dinner. The way his mother answered the phone and then didn't talk about the call. The way certain conversations stopped happening around him when he was 8 and resumed, in fragments, when he was 12. Money was not something that got discussed. It was something that got felt. That's the architecture. Not the credit card balance. Not the $340 in the savings account. The architecture is what Theo learned, before he was old enough to learn anything deliberately, about what money means and how it moves and what it does to the people around it. It means tension. It means relief that doesn't last. It means the good version of things arrives and then leaves on a schedule nobody explained. That's the script his nervous system was handed before he could read. And now, at 31, sitting in an apartment with a stable job and a checking account that empties out in a rhythm that would make sense to no one looking at his income level, he's running the same script, different cast, same lines. Here's what the research says, and the research says it plainly. Over 60% of adults report that childhood experiences directly shape their current financial habits. 60%. That's not a fringe finding. That's most people walking around with a set of beliefs about money that were formed before the age of 10, operating on those beliefs every day, and calling the results their personal choices. The beliefs are called money scripts. They're not opinions you formed after consideration. They're more like conclusions your brain reached in childhood, under conditions of incomplete information and high emotional stakes, and then filed away as fact. They run quietly. They don't announce themselves. They just shape the decision you make every time money is involved, and they've been doing it for so long that the decision feels natural. Theo's script says this: money doesn't stay. You get it, and then it goes. The window between getting and losing is short and unpredictable, and the only rational response to that window is to use it before it closes. That script was accurate when he was 9. His family's financial situation was genuinely unstable. The window was genuinely short. The appropriate response was to take what was available when it was available, because tomorrow it might not be. That was true. That was real information about his real environment. The problem is that the script didn't update when the environment did. Theo got older, got a job, got a paycheck that arrives on the same date every 2 weeks, reliable as anything in his life. But his nervous system didn't get the memo. His nervous system still thinks the window is closing. So he spends, not because he's irresponsible, because he's following the most deeply encoded instruction his brain knows. And it's not just spending. The pattern shows up in other ways too. Sometimes it's avoidance. The bill that sits unopened on the counter for 11 days because opening it feels worse than not knowing. The credit card statement he checks and immediately closes. the retirement account he set up 2 years ago and has not logged into since because the number in it is small enough to be discouraging, and looking at discouraging numbers is not something the nervous system volunteers for. Financial avoidance and financial impulsivity look like opposites. They're not. They're the same nervous system response coming from two different directions. Both of them are ways of not sitting with the reality of your financial situation, because the reality of your financial situation carries the same emotional charge as the original wound. There's a woman named Sandra who described it exactly right. She was earning solid money by her late 20s. Consistent income, professional salary, the kind of number that should have left room to breathe, and she burned through almost every cent of it every month. She couldn't account for it in any rational way. She knew she was doing it. She'd reconcile her accounts at the end of the month and the math would be technically correct and completely baffling. She wasn't buying extravagant things. She was just spending. Continuously. Until there was nothing left. And when she finally went looking for the reason wasn't that she was bad with money. The reason was that she had spent her entire childhood in a house where good things ended without warning, where stability was temporary and abundance was suspicious. So she'd learned to consume what was available before it could be taken. She didn't stop feeling that urgency by making a better budget. She stopped when she addressed the belief itself. The behavior changed because the underlying instruction changed. That's the part most financial advice completely skips. It goes straight to the budget, the savings rate, the debt payoff strategy, the investment vehicle. And all of those things matter. They matter enormously. But they're interventions at the behavior level, and the behavior is downstream of something older and more stubborn. You can build the most technically sound financial plan in the world and still find yourself standing in a store on a Friday afternoon buying something you didn't need because the paycheck landed and the old urgency activated, and the plan was in a spreadsheet somewhere, and the urgency was right here in your body. Theo doesn't talk about this with most people. The money conversation is uncomfortable enough on its surface. Who has what, who owes what people make. Going underneath that, to the childhood stuff, to the emotional wiring, feels like too much exposure. It feels almost shameful. Like admitting that your relationship with money is connected to your relationship with your parents is the same as admitting weakness, or worse, making excuses. But it's not an excuse. It's a mechanism. Understanding a mechanism isn't absolution. It's just the beginning of having any real leverage over it. What gets Theo, what gets most people in this situation, is the sincerity of the belief that this time will be different. He's made that declaration multiple times. After paying down the card, after a conversation with a friend who seemed to have things figured out, after reading something that landed at the right moment. This time, I'll actually build the emergency fund. This time, I won't let the balance creep back up. And he means it completely when he says it. The intention is real. The follow-through collapses not because the intention was fake, but because intention is no match for a neurological pattern that's been rehearsed since childhood. You cannot willpower your way out of a script you don't know you're running. The habit loop is simple and unforgiving. Trigger, routine, reward. For Theo, the trigger is money arriving. The routine is spending it. The reward is a brief and specific kind of relief, the same relief the little kid felt when his dad got paid and the house got lighter for a few days. The reward is real. That's why the loop doesn't break on its own. The brain is not looking for what's financially optimal. The brain is looking for what reliably produces that relief, and it's found it. The fact that the relief is temporary, that the pattern recreates the very tension it was trying to escape, doesn't show up in the loop. That feedback is too delayed. The spending feels good right now and the empty account feels bad next week, and brains are extraordinarily bad at waiting next week against right now. Here's the part that takes a while to see. The financial chaos that Theo grew up around was genuinely painful. He didn't want it. He swore, the way kids swear things, that his life would look different. And in some visible ways it does. He's not his father. His situation isn't identical. But underneath the surface differences, the emotional texture of his financial life is recognizable. There's the same low-grade tension. The same sense that solid ground might not hold. The same rhythm of brief relief followed by renewed pressure. He recreated it not because he wanted to suffer, but because suffering of that specific shape is the only financial emotional language his nervous system learned fluently. Stability, actually, feels strange. Feels like waiting for the other shoe. Feels like something he hasn't earned the right to trust yet. That strangeness around stability is underdiagnosed and underexamined. When people who grew up in financially chaotic environments get access to real financial stability, they sometimes self-sabotage it. Not consciously, not maliciously, but they make a series of small decisions that collectively introduce just enough instability to return the situation to something familiar. The familiar is not comfortable, but it's known. And the known, even when it's painful, is less threatening to the nervous system than the unknown, even when the unknown is better. This is not a character flaw. This is how pattern recognition works in the human brain. The brain prefers a known outcome over an unknown one, almost regardless of quality. There was a study done on lottery winners and whether the windfalls held. The numbers are not encouraging. A significant portion of people who receive large unexpected sums of money return to their previous financial state within a few years. Not because they were reckless in any simple sense, because their internal architecture wasn't built to hold a different outcome. The external number changed, the internal script didn't, and the script runs the behavior. So the behavior, eventually, reconstructed the environment the script was designed for. This isn't fate, it's not permanent, but it is specific, and it is powerful, and it doesn't respond to information alone. Information is not the limiting factor for Theo. He knows the information. He knows the compound interest math. He knows the difference between an asset and a liability. He knows what an emergency fund is supposed to cover and approximately how long it's supposed to last. Knowledge isn't the gap. The gap is between the knowledge and the moment of decision, and inside that gap is everything his nervous system learned before the knowledge arrived. Closing that gap requires something different than more information. It requires looking at where the script came from and being honest about what it was actually trying to solve. Because it was trying to solve something. It was adaptive. It was a reasonable response to a real environment. It just hasn't been updated to reflect the fact that the environment changed. The people who actually break the pattern, not just manage it better for a quarter or two, but genuinely restructure their relationship with money, tend to share one thing in common. They stopped fighting the behavior and started getting curious about it. Instead of asking, how do I stop spending impulsively, they asked, what does the spending feel like right before it happens? And what does that feeling remind me of? That's a harder question. It's slower. It doesn't produce a clean action item. But it leads somewhere the budgeting app doesn't. It leads to the specific moment in childhood when the pattern made sense. And once you can see that moment clearly, once you can understand that the behavior was a solution to a problem that no longer exists in the same form, you have something to work with that willpower alone can never give you. Theo is not unique. The specific details are his. The father's payday mood swings, the tight Tuesdays, the $340 sitting in a savings account at 31. But the structure underneath those details is common enough that behavioral economists have built entire frameworks around it. The scarcity mindset, present bias, the way loss aversion shapes financial decisions more powerfully than the rational expectation of gain. These aren't character flaws cataloged clinically. They're human responses to human conditions, formed early and encoded deeply and running quietly underneath every financial decision a person makes, whether they're aware of them or not. The work isn't to become a different kind of person. Theo doesn't need to become someone who grew up in a house where money was calm and communication was clear and savings accounts held meaningful numbers from an early age. He can't undo any of that. The work is to look at the script his particular house gave him and decide, with full awareness, which parts of it he wants to carry forward and which parts were designed for an environment he no longer lives in. That's not a weekend exercise. That's not a podcast episode that changes everything. That's slow and uncomfortable. And occasionally it means sitting with the specific grief of recognizing how much the early environment cost you. Not in dramatic fashion, but quietly, in the shape of your financial life at 31. In the $340. In the balance that won't go to zero. In the urgency that shows up every payday like it never got the message that things are different now. Because things are different now. The window isn't closing. The paycheck is coming back in 2 weeks, and the 2 weeks after that. The floor, for Theo, is more solid than it ever was in the house he grew up in. But the nervous system doesn't update on reassurance. It updates on evidence. And the evidence it's been given, for 31 years, is that the floor moves. So it stays braced. And the bracing, at this point, costs more than the original instability ever did.